Welcome back to the Hoosier Saga recap. Today, we're going to be taking a look at last weekend's qualifier at FortLan 2024, and also getting an idea of what's to come this upcoming weekend at the third Hoosier Saga qualifier, which is Kilroy Volume 8. This bracket ended up being a great way to kick off Quarter 4, and fortunately, we've got a lot to talk about. Because of some upsets and some DQs early on in bracket, we ended up having the qualifying spot come right down to the wire. So let's start off by looking through the whole bracket and seeing how things played out for the qualifying spot. Things in pools went about as expected as far as the actual matches went. However, there were a couple important DQs that ended up being a major factor towards the end. This led to some players ending up making it out winner's side who had previously been seeded much lower, including Mitch, Blake645, and Pars. Outside of those three, there were two notable upsets that happened in pools that ended up determining part of the bracket. Sigma Bean, Fort Wayne Falco, and Donkey Kong player beat Augment 3-1 to make it out winner's side and fought Defoe, where he would end up barely losing the set in a Game 5 reverse 3-0. Also, Gatsby, Purdue's current active Steve player, ended up taking out Mario, the Fort Wayne player, in a close Game 5 set and got a chance to face off against ArcD in the winner's side of bracket. Top 32 is where things really started to pick up heat as we started to get into the PR matchup territory. In the winner's side of bracket, Grease Almighty ended up having to fight Echofire right away, and it went down to the wire. Despite going down 2-0, Echofire was able to barely clutch out a reverse 3-0 and secure a spot in winner's quarters where he would face off against Duck 190. Duck got a lucky bracket draw with Jaja DQing and got to face off against Mitch, who Duck has had a pretty good track record against. Duck ended up securing a 3-0 win versus Mitch and moved on to fight Echofire. Echofire started out with a dominant first two games, however, Duck was able to adjust and actually take game number 3. Then, Echofire decided to counterpick Duck to smash Bill for game 4, and it ended up being an extremely rough game for him. Duck was able to win that game with a solid 2-stock, and took Echofire to game 5. The game started off pretty close, but Echofire was able to secure a very early kill on the second stock, which gave him the lead he needed to take the set. On the other side of the winner's bracket, Blake645 benefited from a Frostbite DQ and ended up facing off against Boogie. These two have actually had a bit of a track record at regionals, and while Blake almost always falls to Boogie at weeklies and invitationals, at regionals, Blake actually has a 100% win rate versus Boogie. This regional was no different, as Blake was able to secure a 3-0 victory over Boogie and send one of the biggest qualifier candidates to the loser's bracket early. Blake would end up falling to ArcD 3-0 in the next round, meaning that the only Indiana player who would make it to winner's side of top 8 would be Wolfie, meaning every eligible qualifier candidate was now in the loser's bracket. Loser's bracket ended up being a bloodbath between some of the best in Indiana. On the top side of Loser's bracket, a Fort Wayne showdown was forming, with Pars, Augment, Fleetwood, and Loafer all being in the same section. Augment was able to take out both Fleetwood and Loafer, but ultimately ended up losing to Pars. Pars would end up facing Blake645 in a position for top 8. Pars has been looking really dominant and 3-0'd both Augment and Beware Ogre in his loser's path, and while Blake was able to take a game, Pars still secured a 3-1 set win over Blake and secured a spot for top 8. Putting him in an extremely good position for the qualifier spot and guaranteed to be one of the highest Indiana placers that weekend. Grease Almighty ended up making it to the next top 8 qualifier spot after winning a Game 5 set against Fort Wayne's Mario. However, due to a crazy winner's side upset, he had to face off against Sir Dank, the 1 seed of the event. Grease did a pretty good job overall, but Sir Dank ended up taking home the set and secured the top 8 position. For the next top 8 spot, a series of Game 5 sets occurred. Most notably, Cabazco, a Robin player from Fort Wayne, ended up winning Game 5 against both W and Boogie. However, Gatsby was able to end their streak by defeating Cabazco in another Game 5 set. Then, for the top 8 spot, Gatsby ended up losing to Michigan's Suspect in yet another Game 5 set. At this point, Pars was the only eligible player in top 8 for FortLan, and there was only one set remaining. Duck 190 was set to face off against Druish in what ended up being the most important set of the night for the Saga qualifier spot. Game 1 ended up being neck and neck throughout the whole game, however a clutch close quarters banana pull from Duck ended up leading to a kill securing Game 1 for Duck. The momentum from Game 1 seemed to carry into Game 2 as it ended in a solid 2-stock from Duck, putting Duck up 2-0 in the set. For Game 3, Druish ended up counterpicking to Smashville to give Diddy Kong less space to pull banana and less places to land out of Monkey Clip. This ended up really helping out Druish, and after a missed barrels from Duck, Druish was able to gain an important lead. Things went pretty neck and neck from here, however Druish was able to maintain the lead and keep adding on damage going into the final stock. Things were looking rough this game, however, after a great sequence from Duck, the gap ended up getting shorter and shorter until an unfortunate buffered air dodge from Druish would end up leading to a 3-0 victory from Duck, setting up one final showdown for the qualifying spot. In top 8, both Duck and Pars ended up falling to their respective opponents, Suspect and Sir Dank, meaning that the two of them would have to play a tiebreaker best of 5 for the qualifier. Game 1 went pretty well for Duck at the start, however after taking Duck's second stock and still having Rage Drive, Pars started making a quick comeback. Duck was barely able to avoid a trip punish and landed banana securing the game, putting them up 1-0 against Pars. Despite how close the game was, Pars ended up deciding to switch to his Cloud. This is actually a pretty solid pick, as Duck has historically struggled with the character. Mysterica and Duck have played 5 sets in 2024, with Mist using Cloud to secure the win with 4 of them. Game 2 ended up being really tough as Pars held on to his last stock for what seemed like hours. However, a stray back air covering Pars' landing on the platform ended up clutching out the game for Duck, putting them up 2-0. Pars decided to stick with Cloud as it had been doing pretty well, especially in the last stock of Game 2. However, Duck's momentum was way too high, and after missing a finishing touch, Duck was able to grab a banana kill and win the set 3-0, securing their spot in the Hoosier Saga.
But I felt like this is some of the best today I've ever played. I'm glad he qualified. I don't have to worry about it now. I hope Pars qualifies. He's a good friend. I'd love to have him there.
Dude, that's what we were just talking about. August is in the list for potential people to even be qualifying, and so is Colin.
Like I know Pars will make it in. Like it's a no-brainer.
I bet Colin's gonna make it in. There's no shot he doesn't.
And we'll follow up on that in a second. But first, we've got to check out the rest of top 8. Since most of the people watching this will be here for the Hoosier qualifiers, we're not going to take a huge look at some of the stuff that technically didn't fall under the qualifier. However, it would be a crime not to mention Wolfie's incredible run, so we're going to take a quick look at that. In winners' semis, Wolfie had to fight Echo Fire, who had just defeated Duck and Grease earlier in the bracket. Wolfie was able to secure a 3-0 victory over Echo Fire and make it into winners' finals. Wolfie did end up dropping his next set to Defoe in a really close set. However, in losers' finals, he was able to get a 3-0 win against Sir Dank. Wolfie's offline momentum has been crazy recently, and he's starting to solidify his place as one of the Midwest's best players. Now that we've covered all the Indiana action at FortLan 2024, let's take a quick look at the third qualifier, Kilroy Volume 8. It's happening this weekend in Bloomington, Indiana, and there's definitely a couple of close contenders for the spot. But if FortLan has taught us anything, it's to expect the unexpected. So let's take a quick peek at some of the tournament's top seeds and look at some potential bracket paths. For starters, we've got 2 different Kazuya players who are both locks for top 5 seeds at the event. Both Loafer and Pars have been doing extremely well at Indiana events as of late, and both were able to make top 8 at Take Flight 4 this weekend. As mentioned earlier, Pars specifically has been on a bit of a streak, being the runner-up for the FortLan qualifier, as well as grabbing second at Take Flight. It could be time for the world's biggest Kazuya labber to break his second place curse and take home this spot for this weekend. However, there are 2 notable top seeds he'll need to watch out for. Both Wolfie and Grease Almighty have not lost to either Pars or Loafer in 2024, and both are positioned to be the number 1 and number 2 seeds for the event. This makes Grease once again the clear number 1 candidate for the qualifier spot. However, there is one more dark horse who could make waves at this event. Gursley ended up making a breakout run in August at the Butler Brawl, and was able to take Grease to last hit of Game 5 in their previous set. While he has struggled against Kazuya, the possibility of an upset against Grease could end up opening up a big opportunity for him, or for one of the 2 Kazuya players to get in and grab the spot. However, one final important mention here is that Grompy will be returning this weekend, and he's kind of a wild card. Gromp has a 10-3 all-time record versus Wolfie, and a 12-4 all-time record versus Grease. It's safe to say that if Gromp is playing on point, he could very well not only just grab the qualifier spot, but also win the whole tournament. Since he hasn't competed offline in a bit, it's tough to say for sure, but Gromp could definitely end up causing a major shakeup for this tournament. That wraps up this episode of the Saga Recap. We'll be back next time to give a recap over Kilroy Volume 8. However, since we've got a bit of a gap until the next Open qualifier, we'll spend some time looking at the high school season and taking a look into some of the top seeds for Spartan Showdown 2024. Thank you, and see you soon.